I think sometimes I underestimate how brilliant Jesus is. Uh, Jesus was he was faithful to his ministry, but he was really intentionally laser focused on an exclusive few. So he was faithful to the crowds, but he was really, really, really focused on a few. And a friend of yours of mine says, almost as a mantra, more time with fewer people equals a greater impact. And that's what Jesus did. Less than 5% in a recent study of churches in America have a discipleship culture. That's from exponential and discipleship.org. That was a recent study. Um, Less than 1% of church leaders that were surveyed recently said the church is doing a good job at discipling a younger generation. So they would say, I don't feel prepared to disciple someone. Again, let's drill into what the word discipleship means. But about half the students say, I have not been discipled.
Hello, everyone. Dennis Allen with the Disciple Dilemma. Dr. Andrew Yates at Dallas Theological Seminary heads up global disciple making for the students at Dallas Theological. Up close and personal. This ain't a program, it ain't a seminar. He's in the lives of men and women at Dallas Theological, helping them to get a grip on what Jesus set up as the model for disciple making. Beyond academics and beyond theology, which are great at Dallas, Andrew Yates is making it happen. And today he's going to talk about how they're doing it at Dallas, how the trends in society and Western Christianity are going, and this conversation punches right smack in the middle of the problem. Here we go. Well, folks, I often have the opportunity to scrimmage with people on a lot of subjects, but most of them are just simply facing the dilemma, what happened to us, where did discipleship go? With Andrew Yates, who I have had the chance to hang with a little bit, the privilege of hanging with Dr. Andrew Yates, I bow down to him. I just want to start off by thanking you, Andrew, Dallas Theological Seminary, for letting us borrow you today and have a conversation on the disciple dilemma.
Well, Dennis, it's great to be here. I have really appreciate what you're doing. I was just joking about how I've run out of, I bought a dozen of your books and I've handed out at least 10 of them in the last few months. And it's been a wonderful encouragement connecting with you. So thanks for having me on today.
Andrew has been, to me, a fascination, not only for his energy and passion for Christ, but here we've got a PhD and a pastor and a parent and the husband of Kelly, who was out there making the rotary wing world better.
She's the real hero here in this story. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. That's a fabulous thing. And you outkicked your coverage there, I think.
Definitely. They say marry up. I think I might have married too high up. I'm just trying to keep up. She designs helicopter blades. And so my exciting day versus her exciting day are in two completely different worlds. So she helps keep me grounded, ironically.
And you're also a pilot. You've got a pilot's license.
Yes. I was doing some stuff with some search and rescue guys. And there was a way to get my pilot's license before my driver's license, actually.
Whoa.
And so I was doing touch and goes behind C5s for my solo. And so that was intimidating, but yeah, it taught me a lot. But trying to keep up with you. Only props, I hate to say. Never gotten a jet, but it is what it is. I'll take what I can get.
Well, anybody who's doing touch and goes behind a C5 has a tremendous danger of becoming inverted in the jet wash, which is exactly what we want to talk about today around discipleship.
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
Well, so let me pitch a question to you, and let's traffic that for a minute and just see how this thing works out. When we think about the title of today's conversation, non-trad grads, one of the rage words today is trad. Are you a trad wife? Are you a trad worker? Are you a trad generationalist, right? Which means basically, are you kind of in the wrong place doing the wrong thing? Well, I played with that in this title today, non-trad grads, because I'm getting this sense Dallas Theological Seminary is saying we don't like the trajectory of Western disciple making that we have today, and we want to do something about that. And we have hired Dr. Andrew Yates to be able to help us attack that problem. So here's the question, Andrew. As the coordinator for global discipleship And the guy who is sort of the grand poobah of men's development there at DTS, what's that job description? What are you up to?
Well, so yeah, first off, the titles are big and vague, at least in my instance. But the it kind of backs up with a story. Um, about well, actually, 100 years ago, DTS was formed as one of the first non-denominational schools. The leaders then realized that there were some really vibrant churches with really vibrant, aspiring leaders, but they weren't able to speak to German liberalism. They didn't have the philosophy, they didn't have the Greek, they didn't have the Hebrew, and those are things that they were going to have a really hard time learning in their local church. And so basically, the school was founded with the idea of we want to help train senior pastors to not only be equipped to respond to those conversations, but help develop people in their local context who can respond to those challenges. So it was a pretty academic, a 4-year degree. We didn't offer a Master's of Divinity. It was only the Master of Theology, which is another year of Greek and Hebrew, basically, and theology on top of that. But what we found 100 years later is that we have a lot of people that know a lot of things. The technological access that we have through the internet to all knowledge, a younger generation has a ton of knowledge, but students are coming and they've never been discipled. At least that's what they're saying. About 3 or 4 years ago, well, maybe I guess now 5 years ago, two different entities came to DTS and said, we would love to disciple students one-on-one. And the school's like, really? For free? Yeah, let's do that. And we sent out an email and we had 300 people reply and say, no one has ever discipled me. And that was a quick, okay, timeout from the president's office where we said, this is more than an email once a semester. This has got to be, someone's got to be eye on the ball, making sure that if you graduate DTS, you can leave this school and have learned all these things, but you've never had someone sit down with you one-on-one and say, here's the foundational elements that you need to build your life on, not just your doctrine, but your life on, that you can build on for the rest of your life, and you can help someone else build on for the rest of your life. And the goal is not for you to build a huge church. The goal is not for you to preach a wonderful expert sermon, although we hope you do that. The goal is to make disciples, specifically make disciples who can then make disciples after you're gone. And so if you leave here at DTS and you never had that, well, that's on you, because that's my job. And then I have been shocked at how so many of the challenges that higher education and churches are facing, discipleship is a great idea for leaning into those. But real discipleship where people are growing in their faith and growing and they're able to disciple others.
So here's sort of a context question that I need to clarify. You said 300 people responded to this outreach. In the population of DTS, are we talking about 1%, 10%? What would 300 responses sort of equate to?
Yeah, so I would say right now, and I've not done a quantitative analysis of this, so this is my just intuition. I would say about half of the students who attend Dallas Seminary, which is one of the larger seminaries, one of the larger non-denominational seminaries, for sure. But about half the students that come here would say, and this may or may not be true, and they may or mean different things by it, but they would say, if asked, no one has discipled me in a way that I can disciple someone else. So they would say, I don't feel prepared to disciple someone. Again, let's drill into what the word discipleship means. But about half the students say, I have not been discipled.
Okay, so folks, you're hearing live here something that research and stats back up that Andrew is talking about, which is that in the Western community today, stats suggest that somewhere between 80 and 90% of the people in the pews have never been discipled, And so here you've got the cream of the crop coming out of the churches and going to a seminary. And by the way, this is DTS, Dallas Theological, is in the Christian community, kind of the Harvard. It's kind of the Harvard of the seminaries that are out there. And yet, only 1 in 2 is saying, yeah, I've kind of been through a little bit of disciple making, disciple development before. So this kind of tees up the second piece of this. As I listen to your conversation here, I want to ask you, DTS set up apologetics and homiletics and institutionalism, and then they stepped back and they said, wait a minute, we're still missing something. The Christian ethos of a traditional graduate, doesn't include, and this goes across the seminaries as far as I can tell, making disciple makers out of these disciples. So DTS is trying to make non-trad grads out of their grads, right?
Yeah, it's so I mean the whole story with like the foundation of the school, the assumption that students are coming with a rich, vibrant life that'll sustain them through the challenges of seminary, that assumption isn't the case statistically. And you mentioned a couple of statistics. Less than 5% in a recent study of churches in America have a discipleship culture. That's from Exponential and discipleship.org. That was a recent study. Less than 1% of church leaders that were surveyed recently said the church is doing a good job at discipling a younger generation. So the assumption that schools were built on, at least my school, that said students have a vibrant spiritual life, well, that's not true all the time. And so we need to be careful. A lot of students, that is true, but we need to be really, really careful to make sure that students are getting a discipleship experience before they're leading people in the Great Commission, which is to make disciples. A challenge that I recently saw was a handbook of accreditation of one of the larger accreditation agencies for theological schools. It doesn't mention discipleship or mentoring or coaching at all. It just assumes that this is happening. And I think that's a really dangerous assumption that'll shoot us in the foot.
So let me think about this one with you for just a minute. If we consider how the modern Western church functions and operates.
Oh, sure.
Set the problem up for me for just a minute, because if I'm a leader watching this podcast, the Disciple Dilemma tries to reach out, and we think most of our audience is elders and pastors and ministers and parachurch. They're looking at you right now. They're going, well, wait a minute. We do worship great, and we have great Sunday schools, and we have wonderful youth groups. Come on.
Yeah.
What's really the problem here? What is it you're asking us to do with this dearth of people that you say aren't being discipled? What's your kind of view on the great presumption? The great presumption you mentioned a minute ago of these kids are coming out of church, so they must be great disciples. Where's our problem?
So I think it's a couple things, but the goal of our instruction or our gathering or whatever we do has got to be love, and I think it's a distinctively Christian love. But I mean, one of the challenges that Jesus gave to the churches, I think it's the first of the churches that Jesus engages in Revelation. It says you can discern all these things, and you're really specific about heresy, who's who's inside the camp and who's out, who's good and who's not good. We're really, really articulate, but we forgot our first love. If we get so focused on metrics that we lose the goal of making disciples. Mm-hmm. We're not making converts. We're not, the goal is not to have, again, excellence. That's not the point. The goal is to make disciples. We've been doing in the West a lot of church things for a long time, But a lot of leaders overestimate the impact that our programs are having on the actual discipleship. The Reveal study, I think, was one of the first like gut checks for the Western Church, and they, I think, famously went through Willow Creek, where they said participation has zero impact on the growth of someone's heart. So, like, more participation with more events in our context does not help make disciples or does not make better disciples. Prayer, reading scripture, sharing your testimony, serving others who need it. Some of those things are hard to do in some of our contexts, and maybe actually are preventing some of the things we need to do. And those things are good, but that can't be it. Our programs can't be all we do. I want to be really careful not to undermine all the good that is being done. And I want to be careful to not slander the Lord's anointed or not throw the church under the bus. But I think we can grow significantly, and there's a lot of joy to be had. A lot of burnout is going on with churches and church leaders, and a lot of seminarians are graduating and they last less time in the ministry than they did in seminary. And I think we were designed to have joy that sustains us in ministry. And I think when I'm discipling people and I see that life change, that's a source of joy.
So let me try to frame this sort of metaphorically for a moment and
Sure.
see how Dr. Yates would scrimmage this, push back, or throw up all over it, right? One of the things that you're saying here is that the simple act of gathering and being involved in activities in church is important as a symptom of a disciple, but it's not the call of the bondservant, the individual bondservant, to be a disciple. In some respects, so here's the metaphor.
Yeah.
It's a little bit, what you're suggesting brought this to mind. It's a little bit like saying, if I'm a member of Andrew Yates' family and I just eat dinner at the table with them once every 2 or 3 days, I'm doing all I need to do, and they're pouring into me all they need to pour into me for me to be a thriving, flourishing person emerging from the family of Dr. Andrew Yates. And you're pushing back and saying, we need that dinner. We need that time together, but that's not all of it, right? We're missing that core individual. I think you're going at one-on-one-ish or one-on-two-ish lifestyle that goes beyond simple gathering.
Oh, yeah. So I'd say gathering is essential and it's commanded. It's not good to be alone, page 1 of the Bible. And I think right now the average, or not just American, the average human is more isolated than ever before in the history of humanity. So I think we're in a really not good state. The average American has 0.4 friends. So we are super isolated. And the author of Hebrews says, don't forsake gathering together, as is the habit of some. We've got some loners out there and they don't gather. No, we need to gather so we're not hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. That's a command. But if I work out 1.4 times a month, that's not going to cure my diabetes. Like the sickness or unhealth that I have, I'm not going to be a vibrant physical specimen if I'm exercising less than twice a week. The average person gathers and does any spiritual thing at all 1.4 times a month in America. And so if I'm bringing my children to the community of faith 1.4 times a month, I should not be surprised if 10 years later they're not radically different. That's almost enough to inoculate them to the radical challenges of Christ, as more than it is to actually form them and change them and shape them in ways that they wouldn't choose themselves, and myself included there. I think we're called to daily die to sin, and it's going to take a community to do that. But I think Dallas Willard, he said this really, really well, and it was convicting. And you see this some in with Coleman as well. Jesus had a great plan. And I think sometimes I underestimate how brilliant Jesus is. Uh, Jesus was he was faithful to his ministry, but he was really intentionally laser focused on an exclusive few. So he was faithful to the crowds, but he was really, really, really focused on a few. And a friend of yours of mine says, almost as a mantra, more time with fewer people equals a greater impact. And that's what Jesus did.
Dallas Theological and a lot of other seminaries have for years said the Lausanne Conference is the summum bonum of what we're supposed to be about, which is get out there and save people.
Mm-hmm.
DTS is saying something different now. They're not saying converts. We're mentioning this in the title graphics, by the way,
Sure,
folks.
yeah.
It's not about converts. So I want to hear you talk for just a minute. I thought DTS was supposed to make people go out and proclaim the gospel so people would get saved. What the heck else are you asking us to do?
As you see this in Jesus, you scatter seed, like the sower went sowing, scattering seed, but the goal wasn't just how many plants. The goal is that many plants would grow and bear much fruit.
Okay, so I really want to pin you on this one because I want to make sure I got you on tape. What you're telling everybody here, just plain text, Dr. Yates, is that evangelism isn't the end objective.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You can have evangelism without discipleship. You can, absolutely. But you can't have discipleship without evangelism. Evangelism is a healthy outpouring of that. But the goal can't just be to make evangelists of all nations. It's to make disciples of all nations.
I love the way you're setting this up, and I keep wanting leaders to get this. If all you do is evangelize, you're creating orphans and you're leaving them out there to the wild.
Yeah, and that's the idea of like unhealthy growth. Every business has, the business has the concept of I can grow too much this year. If we do, spiritual babies, they make spiritual messes, and I think God is very kind to allow me to have only had one child at a time. I've had friends that have had twins. I've had friends who had triplets, and some people, they preach a sermon, and I think this is great. They've got 100 people walk the aisle, they pray the prayer, they get baptized, but one person cannot spiritually parent 100 people well. I can't know 100 new people's names, much less love them. So what we have to do as a church, as a family, as a community, is say, who is going to own and love this person here well?
As we round the corner on this, I'm going to start out with my experience in the business world, and then I'm going to ask you to pick it up and see if it has any correlation to the stuff you're doing with men at DTS. When I go into a business, my world is helping ailing businesses turn around, get out of the bad direction and get going in a good direction.
Sure.
And one of the things that I notice about every business is every single business has a unique personality. It has unique people, unique
Sure.
skills, unique markets, unique products. Every single business, no matter what business you're talking about. However, all of those businesses that I've turned around tend to find themselves in a common script. The problem is a common problem, but the business and the person is unique. The people are unique. So it requires every single business to have a very unique application against their lives, their strengths, their weaknesses, their points and direction and aspirations. What are you doing with the men at DTS, since you're working with men there, to build this bridge from mere evangelism into being disciple makers? What are you doing with all these guys?
Yeah. So I think the scale is, especially in the social media tech world now, the scale is completely overwhelming. I worked at one of the largest churches in the history of the world, and this is one of the largest seminaries in the history of the world, and the scale is impossible. It is far too big, and I sympathize with every church leader that says the harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. There's just a mob of people that I can't lean into. But I look at what Jesus did when after he said that, he told his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. And he said, and this is going to sound cliche, but just hear me out. He said, therefore pray that the Lord of the harvest would send workers into his harvest. This is not my problem to solve. And again, the founder in the book, True Evangelism, I encourage your listeners to download it. It's free. The PDF's been uploaded. It's over 100 years old. But he says, I am not an effective evangelist because I present it so convincingly. I'm actually quite boring. And I actually spend less time evangelizing than the average evangelist. But what I do is I spend a ton of time in prayer. And I think one of the only two times that we know that Jesus spent time in prayer was before he was assassinated, betrayed by, one of the guys closest to him, and before he chose who are the few people that I'm going to focus on for my ministry. And so I think the first thing that God has really convicted me for is this is his problem. It's not my problem. And the second thing is, God, who do you want me to focus on? And so in my context, we've got what we've called spiritual formation. And a lot of schools have implemented spiritual formation since the 2000s. Again, leaning into how do we help give a model of healthy, vibrant personal spirituality and self-awareness, all these things. What are your gifts? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And we just jumped in the model, like where are the 5 or 6 guys? Maybe Jesus had 12. I can do 5 or 6. But who are the 5 or 6 guys that I can really, really invest in for 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years and say, all right, I've given you all you need to lay a foundation to build on and to serve someone else.
So I want you to, in our wrap up, kind of a summary minute.
Yeah.
I want you to talk to pastors because you've been a pastor.
Oh, yeah.
And I want you to think about the bandwidth that we're discussing here. Some pastors are just wondering how they're going to get enough money to keep the lights on in their church.
Yeah.
And they got nobody around them willing to do anything.
Yeah.
And some pastors, perhaps like you, are sitting in a mega church and looking at a shopping center mall a subway flow of human beings going by. And both of those pastors, I think, are asking the same question. Are we focused where we're supposed to be focused? What should I take away from this conversation? How would you summarize as a pastor to these pastors today?
I think there's a couple things that I would want pastors and church leaders to hear. Paul says in Corinthians that it's required of servants to be found faithful. He doesn't say it's required of servants to be found awesome or to be just even good at your job. Just be faithful at what God has called you to do. And so that's the first thing. Even if you are a Jeremiah and the city that you are in is shut down, is destroyed, and you are drugged by your nose into exile across a desert. If that is what God has called you to do, don't settle for doing anything else. And don't allow the Satan to tell you that you are a failure. Success is being faithful to what God has called you to do. But then I want to remind you to not forget your first love. God has called us to make disciples. And so if we are measuring other things, that is good. Are people coming? Are people giving? Those are the things that we easily measure when we're at our best a lot of times. But that is not enough. The goal is to say, are we growing in the fullness that's in Christ? Are we growing as disciples? And I think the question that is the most convicting question that could be asked is, who in your congregation is discipling someone else? Is anyone growing in that? Because that is the win.
So, in other words, you're saying the metric is not counting butts in the seats, baptisms, and cash flow. You're actually suggesting that the ultimate metric is, are disciples making disciples?
That is the ultimate metric, yes. And I would say I've talked to several churches that are doing this. Again, the 5% of churches in America, according to a couple recent studies, that are actually doing this. I've been connected with their leaders, and I'm saying, what are you doing, and how would you advise other churches to get where you are, to have a culture change into this direction where when someone gets baptized, they go and they sit down in their seat, and people walk up and say, hey, good to meet you. Super excited to have you as a member of this community, a member of this faith, a new Christian. We're going to be friends for the next couple of weeks, next couple of months. Here's my cell phone. Let's connect. And let's talk about what does it mean now that you're a Christian to learn how to walk in that faith. To get to that culture, you are too busy right now. You're too busy. But you are not so busy that you can't meet once a week with someone and invest in them and say, here are the things you need. Not all the things, but here's the foundation you need that every Christian needs to be built on a life, that a life can be just placed on Jesus Christ, that you can build on the rest of your life. But also, I'm going to expect you to pass this on to someone else. You can meet with one person a week. You can do that. And whoever your church team is, if you have elders, if you have deacons, if you have key staff, or whatever your community is, your key leaders can disciple one person this year. So this year, every week, just get one coffee or one lunch or one dinner or just one whatever once a week, invest in them. And then the expectation is that they would invest in one other person. And in 3 or 4 years, your church has changed, which is the timeline, interestingly, that Jesus had. He said, I'm going to invest and I'm going to expect in 3 years, I'll have done enough to where I can step out. So don't do a sermon series. Don't do a promo. Don't do a sign up. As much as you can, imitate what Jesus did. He prayed, and then he said, all right, God, who do you want me to invest in? And I would say, you've got time for one. You've got time for one. And if by the time your life is over, you've got a dozen, well, then that's a life well lived. If a dozen men or a dozen women are investing in one person, that scales.
Andrew, as we wrap this up, you and I, not too long ago, were at a conference where we got to talk to an awful lot of people who were in Christian education, higher Christian ed, seminaries. And one of the things that I keep sensing is there's a lot of people staring toward the future and they're discouraged. These people who are leading seminaries, leading Christian colleges and universities, they're discouraged. They don't know exactly where to point things and how to work things. We've been talking today about what's been going on at Dallas Theological, your own work as the coordinator for global discipleship. What kind of thoughts do you have to offer to, I'm going to say, a lot of leaders who are really worried about what's in front of them on the strategic horizon?
Yeah. So it's a frightening place out there in higher education. There's been several seminaries and Bible colleges that have closed recently. There's a demographic cliff, population decline. There's challenges through technology. There's financial challenges that are severe. But I really think that Jesus' model of discipleship is helpful not just at the church, but also in higher education. Students are coming in with more mental health issues than ever before, and we cannot hire enough counselors. No matter what your school is, there are not enough student services to serve the needs that these students are coming in with. But I will say, if every student is actively being discipled, they've got somebody that's not grading their papers, that's not taking finances, not paid for their tuition, that is just loving them and wants to see them thrive, their mental health is better. the students are more likely to finish their programs, and they're more likely to find internships. They're more likely to find jobs because they've already been integrated personally, not organizationally, but intimately connected with a local body through discipleship in a really, really meaningful way that a seminary can't and probably shouldn't provide all the time. We can give really good stuff, but there has to be a really meaningful integration with the local church. And a lot of local churches are just surviving. And this is an opportunity to encourage that connection. Also, I mean, just practically, and this almost feels bad, but when a student's car breaks or has a financial challenge, when that happens, not if that happens, when that happens, if I'm discipling a student, I'm going to help figure out that problem. Like, you don't have food, we're going to solve this problem today, and we're going to do it in a way that's more effective and more efficient than maybe student services could. And by the time they hear out, the problem might already be two down the road. But if I have someone who's a spiritual father or a spiritual mother, I'm way more engaged. And if I'm given, I mean, this is almost sounds bad, but like those are the future donors. Those are the future ministry partners for this institution miles down the road. But if you are a student, you want to make sure, and you're saying, or a future student, you want to go to a school that encourages and fosters discipleship. And if you are a leader of an institution and you don't have one-on-one discipleship, well, you've got to keep on raising stories that someone can like passively engage, that are compelling for local ministry leaders to engage with. But if it's way better to have one-on-one discipleship where these students are incredible, where they're engaged with these incredible leaders. So I have been shocked that so many schools don't do and don't encourage one-on-one discipleship, especially because you don't have to run it. You just have to be the one that challenges students to be discipled, to get discipled. I can disciple some. I can't disciple everybody. Our faculty can't disciple everybody, but it's the harvest is the Lord's harvest. And the Lord has workers that he is already sending into the harvest. And we have to challenge students to grow in a way that they can be self-feeders. And it starts with discipleship. But we can't assume that students are being discipled. And that's just not a formula for success. So I would love to encourage any school that's not doing discipleship, especially one-on-one, not encouraging their students to be engaged in one-on-one discipleship. I would love to connect them. You can reach out to us at discipleship@dts.edu, and we'll get back to you. But truly, and I think an open-handed perspective that isn't grounded in like a scarcity resource. The president of DTS has said, if you can encourage anyone anywhere on earth to grow in discipleship, do it. That doesn't mean I have to disciple every single person on earth, but I can encourage you to grow in discipleship. And that's God's problem. It's not my problem. So God has got somebody for your student to be discipled. And every one of our students, if they graduate here and have never been discipled, it's going to be a disaster. We have not set them up to succeed. So we have to do that. And I'm really, really thrilled that we've just in the last 4 or 5 years recognized that here at DTS, and we're doing that. But we've got to do it if we're going to be raising up leaders for the world, no matter what denomination they're at or what school they're at.
As Andrew was wrapping that up, folks, you're seeing discipleship at dts.edu on your screen. Also, the website for Dallas Theological Seminary, a lot of great resources out there, and you can actually stalk Andrew, his rap sheets out on the Dallas Theological Seminary website as well to reach out and connect through discipleship at dts.edu. Dr. Andrew Yates, thank you for helping us talk about and untangle part of the disciple dilemma. Thanks for being with us today.
Would it be helpful? I've got an article I published or I presented at Society of Professors in Christian Education. Can we make that available?
Let's open that up right now. Andrew, you have published in a number of places, and obviously you just recently finished your PhD. Congratulations on that, by the way, over at Southwestern.
I hate to say Doctorate of Education, an EDD, not a PhD. They say it's a little more practical. We'll see. I hope so.
Well, Dr. Andrew Yates,
either way,
what kind of resources you want to dangle out there on the website for us to let people know what's going on.
Yeah, so I just finished up a degree in leadership in Christian higher education, specifically focused on resilience. And I saw discipleship was a huge part of this. I presented a paper for the Society of Professors in Christian Ministry, SPCM, just a few months ago. I'd love to make that available to your viewers and listeners if that's available. Can we throw that in a link for that in the notes? Is that possible?
Absolutely. We'll have that in the notes. We'll put it out on LinkedIn as well. People can snatch that and point to that. So you get that to us, we get that to them, and thank you.
If I could be a resource to any of your listeners, seriously, people do not believe this, but if Bob Goff and Love Does can put up his cell phone, I can engage, and he's got a way bigger viewing than either of us, I think, ever combined. If I can serve in any way, I'd love to. And again, discipleship@dts.edu will go straight to me. So looking forward to connect with any of your listeners or followers in any way that I can.
Okay, folks, he opened the doors and invited you in. So here we go. Dr. Andrew Yates, thank you for being with us on the Disciple Dilemma.
God bless you. Thanks so much for letting me join. This is a super fun time. Really, really excited about it. And the work you're doing is great. Keep up the good work.
Would you help the church think more about discipleship? Would you help us get the conversation started to talk about the biblical discipleship Jesus gave us? Please follow us. Our website, www.thediscipledilemma.com. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and all the RSS feeds. If you'd follow or like us, you'll help us get leverage in the digital marketplace to talk about the fact that discipleship needs to be talked about. And as always, folks, thanks for listening.